the problem is the physicians of today, most of them are not getting the knowledge they need to be critical thinkers and to protect the public.
Welcome to the Brain Fit Podcast, where we share the cutting-edge science on how you can improve your memory and live a happier, healthier life. My name's Robert Love. I'm a neuroscientist and I have a medical clinic in Florida where we are reversing Alzheimer's in our patients. Today is about the scary things students are learning at Harvard Medical School and what they're not learning. I'm interviewing Dr. Josh Helman, a medical doctor trained at Harvard. He recently went back for his medical school reunion. He talked to first-year medical students. It was really scary, the things they are learning and they are not learning. When he told me about this, I wanted to do a podcast with him right away to get this information out because I think it's really important. So here is Dr. Josh Helman. The one, the only Dr. Josh Helman. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Robert, it's always a pleasure.
So we scheduled this interview because you just went to your medical school reunion at Harvard, and you also went to MIT. And so you went there, and you shared some stuff with me that's really, really scary about what students are learning and what they're not learning at medical school. And I said, Josh, can you please come on and do a podcast? People need to know this. And so what's the most concerning thing that students are no longer learning at Harvard Medical School?
Yeah, and let me be clear. This was just a 55th anniversary celebration for a Harvard MIT Medical School program called HST, Health Sciences and Technology, a very small group, maybe 30 or 40 students every year. And the good news is that group is still doing everything right. They're still getting anatomy. They're still learning biochemistry. But the problem is, and it's not just Harvard, it's what I'm hearing is from other doctors, it's most medical education now is very different than when I went to medical school. I mean, I finished in 1993, so that was a long time ago. But just over the last 25 years, 30 years, things have changed. The education has been diluted. They're talking about, instead of making it 4 years, making it 3 years, speeding everything through. And here's why it's a problem or an issue. Whereas when I went to medical school, we actually learned anatomy by dissecting a cadaver. Apparently, what most medical schools are doing today now is you don't actually dissect a cadaver. Your instructor does what's called a prosection. Your instructor does the dissection for you and then shows you what you should see. So that's number one. Number two, the medical school program at Harvard and other places, you're either dissecting an arm or a leg. You're not doing both, as if your arm and your leg are the same anatomically. They're not. So it's like this push to rush through. It's like, why would you do both an arm and a leg? And it's ludicrous. If you're going to have a physician, you want that physician to know basic anatomy. And I don't know any substitute in learning anatomy to actually have a cadaver and dissect it. I know it's gross, but there's something to be said for actually, it's like learning to put together a puzzle without ever having a puzzle with pieces to put together. It doesn't make any sense.
This is terrifying. And I really want competent medical doctors, and I want them to understand the human body. And if we look back in the history of medicine, we look back to one of the biggest scientists in the field of medicine, we find Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci was famous for doing dissections that weren't very legal. And he was doing them for two reasons. Number one, he wanted to learn the human body for science. And number two, he wanted to learn the human body for art. And his art was very real because he did dissections. So did Michelangelo. Michelangelo might be a better anatomist than many medical students today. And Leonardo was the first one to discover that he looked at someone who had a heart attack and he found a bunch of gunk in the arteries, found like cholesterol in the arteries. He said this person died from overnutrition. He was the first person he didn't share this with anybody else. It was in his journal. But he found out through dissection that heart disease was caused from overnutrition. That was his theory, and he was absolutely correct. And the idea that and that was 500 years ago, the idea that we're reducing that exposure of dissection to future doctors is really scary to me.
It is, and it's not just anatomy. It's a similar approach to biochemistry. Whereas, I mean, I'm biased because I have 2 degrees in biochemistry, but what I find scary is the physicians who are coming out of training today at most programs are not getting in-depth biochemical pathway training. They're just not. And for that reason, they are not, because they don't understand all the complexities of the biochemical pathways, they just don't have the underlying knowledge to understand, number one, how medications work, and number two, when things go wrong, how the pathways actually work if they haven't actually studied these basic pathways.
This is very concerning to me because your degree in biochemistry has been very useful in our medical clinic, working with our patients, and then designing supplements. So we designed the best NMN supplement, and we relied heavily on your biochemistry knowledge to make the best NMN supplement with the best components to it to make it the most effective. And how specifically regarding medication, I am very concerned with the number of patients who come to us who have memory loss, who are taking drugs that impair their memory by blocking acetylcholine, anticholinergics. Benadryl blocks this, and the research is very clear. If a neurologist or a gerontologist, someone who works with people over age 60, if they read the literature, they should know that if you take an anticholinergic drug for more than 6 months, this increases the risk of Alzheimer's by about 40%. And so many of these people are on these drugs, and we'll meet them in our clinic or do a consult with them. And they said, I had no idea that was hurting my memory. And if the doctor understood these things, a lot fewer people would have memory loss caused by the drugs they're taking.
Agreed. And here's one of the important concepts is you want a physician who's well-trained. What does well-trained means? It means that they have a depth and a breadth of knowledge. So guess what? It doesn't matter what program you go through. At some point, you're going to finish your program and be a young physician. The problem in the issue is that the physicians coming out of many training programs today don't have the same depth and breadth that I fortunately got when I went through this Harvard MIT program. And the good news is 55 years later, this program is still, they haven't diluted it. They're still training excellent physicians, but it's only 30 or 40 coming out every year. So that's
and how big is Harvard Medical School class that's not doing the joint program with MIT?
So it's about 4 times the size, like 160 students.
Okay, so the majority of the doctors who are at Harvard, which is one of the top medical schools, maybe Johns Hopkins is one. It might rotate from year to year, but Harvard's certainly one of the best medical schools in the country, in the world. And most of those doctors are not getting the anatomy training that they were 30 years ago, 20 years ago.
Right. And here's another thing, Robert, in terms of the dilution of the amount of expertise, you also have many nurse practitioners and physician assistants who don't have the same training that medical doctors have, but they, for the system is basically saying, oh, it doesn't matter that your only training was you're a physician assistant with 2 years of experience. 2 years, hey, that's just as good as a medical doctor with 4 years. So there's this whole dilution of, what is it going to be next? Like you go to medical school, you just need to take a weekend course. I mean, it's like, where does it stop? It's ludicrous.
If you or someone you love has Alzheimer's or another form of dementia, I want you to know there is hope. Alzheimer's is preventable and it is even reversible. In fact, we are reversing Alzheimer's in my medical clinic here in Florida. My partner and medical director is Dr. Josh Helman, a medical doctor trained at Harvard who specializes in preventing and reversing Alzheimer's disease, and we are reversing Alzheimer's in our patients. If you'd like to learn more about working with us to both prevent Alzheimer's and even reverse Alzheimer's and reverse memory loss associated with other forms of dementia, we would love to hear from you and send you some free information so you can learn what we are doing and see if it's a fit for you to come down and work with us in our clinic. We also work with other clinics around the country to help patients both prevent Alzheimer's as well as to reverse Alzheimer's and reverse memory loss associated with dementia. So if you'd like to learn more, go to brainpowerclinics.com. Go to brainpowerclinics.com and then enter your information. We will send you some free information, and then we hope to work with you if we can be helpful to you to help you prevent and reverse Alzheimer's disease.
the amount of nutrition they're learning is really scary. I want to get back to nutrition in a moment, but I heard something when I was growing up. I wanted to ask you if this is true. So I heard the phrase "never get sick in the summer," meaning you don't want to go to a teaching hospital in the summer because that's when the new residents, the new interns, basically the new medical students are there, and they're going to be diagnosing you. They're going to be potentially performing your surgeries. So is that true? The idea that you definitely don't want to go to a teaching hospital in the summer?
Well, I would say instead of summer, most of these programs start July 1. So in June, you're going to be okay. But no, you don't necessarily want to get sick on July 1. The problem is many times people don't get to choose when they're getting sick. Now, having said that, if it's July and I had a medical issue, I would still go to a teaching hospital, but I would be careful. I would, want to make sure who's ever taking care of me is actually has some background and some training in what they're doing.
But if they're a new medical student, I mean, their training is now the rush through medical training that they're not doing dissections or learning biochemistry.
Right. And the flip side is, so the safety valve is, okay, so it's not the intern with no training. Maybe it's the resident who's actually been there for an extra year. And then you hope that they've, in that last year or more, they've learned some of this. But the problem is the breadth and the depth is no longer the focus. I remember when I was in my training, decades ago, that they basically said, Josh, what makes our training different than a nurse or some of these other paraprofessionals is the breadth and the depth. We want you, even though, let's say you're not going to be a pediatrician, we still want you to rotate in pediatric wards to understand the physiology of kids. So it's the breadth and the depth. And for whatever reason, that's being pushed aside. So here's one of the key differences. It's not just anatomy or biochemistry. It's the concept, and this is very important. It's the concept that I learned, which the most important thing is to solve problems. And if you've got a human life on the line, or their limb on the line, then there should be no limit to your problem solving.
Absolutely.
And it shouldn't be about silos, which is, this might be a gastrointestinal problem, and I'm not a gastrointestinal specialist. Therefore, I'm not allowed to think about it or put these pieces together. And that's, you see over specialization where, I think it's really cool for someone to specialize in the field, but the problem is that what happens when someone has a problem that's in more than one system? Go ahead.
And so many of them are.
Yeah.
The idea of the mind, the body. When I was in school, we talked about the brain almost as if it was in a separate silo from the body with the blood-brain barrier. And now we know that's clearly not true. Exercising the muscles in the body increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and that affects the brain. So healthy body, healthy brain, healthy heart, healthy brain. That's not what we were talking about when I was studying physiological psychology at Swarthmore. It was here's the blood, here's the brain, here's the blood-brain barrier, here's the neurotransmitters. It was much less about the body, but now we know better. And so there's very few, and we've seen this in our clinic, there's very few issues in the brain that aren't affected by the body.
Right. And so historically, physicians have been basically the safety guard ensuring quality. But the problem is the physicians of today, most of them are not getting the knowledge they need to be critical thinkers and to protect the public.
And you mentioned the limbs. I find medical accidents to be really tragic. I'm sure you know the stories of, someone goes in for surgery and they're going to have a limb amputated and they amputate the wrong limb. And so now you see smart people taking a Sharpie on their and says like, not this one, right? Just in case, someone got something screwed up, you got to write on your arm, not this one, because you want to make sure they're doing the surgery on the correct arm.
Yeah.
How important is bedside manner? So I'm fascinated by medical history, and then the majority of medicine practice, kind of from the Renaissance up until recently, has really been about the doctor being a patient, compassionate person, listening to their problems, reassuring them, and then offering them some help. Sometimes it was an elixir. Sometimes it was herbs. Sometimes it was bed rest. Sometimes it was, don't worry, you're going to get over this. But but bedside manner was something that patients really valued. Just like today they value, a psychologist or someone who listens to their problems. How important is bedside manner in being a good doctor, and how is that trained in medical schools these days?
It's critical. You need a good relationship between the physician and the patient. The problem is you now have all these things standing in the way, coming between the patient and the physician. As an example, you've got these computer system electronic medical records where sometimes the physician will barely even look at the patient. They're spending most of the time looking at a screen.
Goodness.
It's not good. So that's one barrier. Another barrier is, unlike generations ago when the patient went to the physician, the patient paid the physician, there are now all these third parties, insurance, etc., in between that relationship, and it's not healthy.
And so, and that also affects what the doctor's willing to do, because some things are covered by insurance, some aren't covered by insurance, and some things are the standard of care and not the standard of care. And many doctors, certainly during COVID, we couldn't have this conversation several years ago because talking about COVID would just get censored. Unfortunately, now thankfully we can have these conversations.
New research from Kansas Medical School found that 20 grams of creatine a day reversed memory loss in people with Alzheimer's disease. This study was published June 4th of 2025. So very new research. The research study found that taking this amount of creatine had very few side effects, very few if any, and improved memory. Not only that, but research from Dr. Daniel Amen that he has shared, patients who are undergoing psychotherapy for depression who take creatine, they have a better result than those who just do the psychotherapy. So the psychotherapy helps, and then people who take creatine do even better. Creatine has so many benefits, especially for women over 40. Women, you make less creatine than men, and creatine helps maintain muscle mass. And by having healthy, strong muscles, this helps ensure you have bone density. And so when you take creatine and exercise, you can maintain your muscle mass, and then you can maintain your bone density. This can help reduce the risk of osteoporosis. So many benefits of creatine. It is one of the most studied supplements on the planet. I have the best creatine available today. It's called Screaming Eagle Creatine. First of all, it's the right form of creatine, which is creatine monohydrate. So make sure you get that. Next, it's from the highest quality. It's third-party tested and GMP certified. So it's good stuff. And it's the right dose. Most people have the wrong dose on their creatine. They say only 5 grams a day. Mine is 20 grams a day. And so start slowly, but work up to 20 grams a day. That's going to be amazing for your brain. You actually need a very high dose because your muscles will use it all up. You need to take a high dose so that your brain can have access to the creatine. So mine's the right dose. It's the highest form, highest quality. And so you can get a chance to try it. You can try this risk-free because it comes with a 6-month unconditional money-back guarantee. And you get free shipping when you use the code LOVEPODCAST. So to get my Screaming Eagle Creatine at an amazing price and risk-free, to try this risk-free, you click the link in the show notes below or go to robertlove.net.
A lot of doctors wouldn't recommend certain things because it was not the standard of care, and going outside the standard of care kind of put their license in jeopardy. Can you talk about the standard of care, what that is, and why that somewhat keeps doctors from thinking to solve an individual problem and instead just kind of prescribing what they've been told by a large medical institution?
Sure. So standard of care traditionally is what would a comparable physician in my role, what decision would they make? So historically, that's what it was. What it's turned into is standard of care is what your professional specialty organization recommends. So you have this top down, if you have this condition, you're going to be doing these 20 things. And here's the distinction. I have no problem with guidelines like, hey, you've got chest pain, you should maybe consider these 10 things. But a suggestion is one thing, but when it becomes a necessity and you're not allowed to look at anything else besides those 10 things, that's not right. And that's what it's turned into if you're dependent on insurance to pay, and insurance says, oh, but we're only going to pay for these 10 tests or these 10 modalities, you're not allowed to look at nutrition or other potential treatments or cures.
So speaking of nutrition, a doctor I really admire, Dr. Casey Means, who graduated top of her class from Stanford. I think she went to Stanford undergrad and Stanford Medical School, again, another top medical school. I think she was president of her class at Stanford as well. She had a residency as a surgeon, a surgical residency. I think it was ENT, ear, nose, and throat. And she noticed that a lot of her patients had inflammation, and she was basically performing surgery to help with inflammation. And she talked to her chief resident or the head of the practice and said, hey, I think this surgery is actually not going to be helpful because this person is doing something that's causing inflammation because I could see it in their bodies. And this surgery is only going to be temporarily helpful. So I think surgery is inappropriate. I think we want to look at something else, maybe their lifestyle, maybe their diet, maybe their sleep. We want to look at something else. And she got very reprimanded. The doctor said, these are her words. She said, you are paid to cut. You are paid to do surgery. We do serious medicine here. That was a phrase she said. We do serious medicine. We don't do diet. We don't do nutrition. You're paid to cut. And so perform the surgery or basically you need to leave because that's what we do here. Is that sort of thing typical today in the United States?
I think it is. I mean, every place is going to vary, but there's this, from a financial standpoint, that chief resident, whoever said that to her, was correct. The profit what's the right concern? The profit mechanism is you operate and you earn money from operations. You don't make money recommending cutting out dairy to someone who's inflamed because you can't charge thousands of dollars like you can to remove a tonsil, for example. So the financial setup has not changed. The incentivize procedures, and I'm not opposed to procedures, but the problem is that the problem is the whole focus of the system right now is you wait until you've got a chronic condition, and then and only then, when it's advanced, then you try to fix it. There's very little emphasis on prevention, which, by the way, often is a lot less expensive to prevent a chronic disease than to wait until you have advanced diabetes and then you're chopping off limbs. And I mean, but if you look at the current, who benefits from the current system, it's sure you benefit financially from charging for an operation to remove a limb, for example.
And that's a problem when we're talking about people's health. There's the old adage, to the person with a hammer, everything is a nail. And so someone could have back pain. They go to a chiropractor. The chiropractor says, "Okay, you need chiropractic." You go to an osteopath. They recommend something else. You go to someone who does surgery. They say, "Oh, you actually need surgery." You go to someone who, an internist who prescribes drugs. Like, "Oh, you just need these anti-inflammatory drugs." And so, like, every person could have their own solution. Every different doctor could have their own solution that fits their modality. Right? The surgeon's going to recommend surgery, probably, not necessarily lifestyle. The surgeon's probably not going to recommend chiropractic, even if that would be most beneficial for them. This is a problem because they're basically selling the procedures that they have, whatever that is, whether it's drugs or surgery or some other sort of intervention, rather than saying what is best for this patient and can I refer this patient to someone who's going to give them the care that they need, rather than giving this patient what I sell.
Right. And my concern is that there's lack of transparency. So even though we're maybe 4 or 5 years post the start of COVID, there is still fear, even in leadership at medical schools and elsewhere. There's fear for doctors to share their opinion about different surgeries if it's not politically correct.
Why is the outcome of surgery, why is that political, or what would be not politically correct about a surgery?
So for example, if you have someone who's doing gender reassignment surgery in someone under 18, it's not. It may have changed, but historically, in the last 4 or 5 years, it was not politically correct to question whether kids under the age of 18 should be allowed to have this procedure.
NMN is one of the most powerful anti-aging and longevity supplements available today. And research shows that NMN helps reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease in 9 different ways. Here are just some of the benefits of NMN. NMN helps repair DNA. That's a direct anti-aging benefit. NMN increases energy. NMN improves memory. NMN improves blood flow, so it delivers more oxygen and nutrients to your cells. NMN helps protect mitochondria. NMN improves energy production from mitochondria. NMN also improves your gut bacteria. And a research study published in the journal Science found that NMN reversed insulin resistance in women with pre-diabetes. So NMN helped reverse resistance. That journal article is published in the journal Science. So many benefits of NMN. I have the best NMN available today. I designed this with a medical doctor from Harvard, Dr. Josh Helman. So ours has the best formula. It's the right kind of NMN, NMN beta. That's the shelf-stable form. And it's got 2 bonus ingredients, trimethylglycine and B complex vitamins. These contribute methyl groups, which allow you to use NAD and NMN more effectively. So this is the very best formula of NMN. It's the highest quality, third-party tested, GMP certified, and you can try it risk-free because it comes with a 6-month unconditional money-back guarantee. And you get free shipping on it when you use the code LOVEPODCAST. The code is LOVEPODCAST at checkout. That saves you $10 for free shipping. So to try this absolutely risk-free, to get the many benefits of NMN that are backed by scientific literature, you can click the link below in the show notes or go to robertlove.net. I mean, God bless these people. It's got to be very difficult to live in a body that you feel is not your body and it should be different. That's going to be very difficult. My heart goes out to these people, and I'm concerned for those that get certain treatments. I believe the research shows that those who have a surgery that changes their sex, they have a dramatic increased risk of depression and anxiety. That's concerning to me. That affects their quality of life. That affects their risk of suicide. That affects so many different things. And so it'd be really important if someone's considering one of these surgeries, say, look, I understand you're not happy with the gender you are, and that doesn't feel right, and you want to transition. Here are the risks, right? Here, based upon the data, here are the risks. And, and frankly, if you're over 18, do whatever you want with your body. If you're under 18, I think we should consider what's right. The parents should be involved. But I think it's really important people understand the side effects and the risks of just like if you're going to have a heart transplant, they say, look, these things could happen during the surgery and you might die. And here's the risk of that. So do you want to do the surgery based upon these risks?
Right. So my biggest concern is that physicians are not allowed to share their opinion. If they share their opinion about a certain type of surgery, they get canceled, they get fired, they get suppressed.
There's cancel culture amongst physicians.
True.
That's really scary. I heard this happening during COVID. A lot of them were having their licenses pulled or their licenses questioned, or they were going in front of boards. Really problematic. Dr. Josh, you mentioned standard of care. You and I work in the field of Alzheimer's prevention and reversal. We have a medical clinic where we are reversing Alzheimer's in our clinic. You are the medical director. And we get a lot of people who see neurologists, people who specialize in the brain. And many of our patients are frustrated with the standard of care that they are getting from so many neurologists. Can you describe the standard of care in neurology right now, or in medicine, or in Western medicine, generally speaking, allopathic medicine, which is versus naturopathic medicine, allopathic medicine, which is most Western medicine here in the United States. What is the standard of care for Alzheimer's disease?
Yeah, so the standard of care today in 2025 is that you offer medications like Aricept or Namenda, and I have no problem with that. But then the new standard of care is that you also offer drugs that I don't think are safe, specifically antibodies against amyloid, drugs like Leqembi and Kisunla, that a third of the patients get brain bleeds and brain swelling, to the point that if you actually want to take one of these drugs, you're required to have a brain scan every month. So when you get a brain bleed, we can catch it quickly.
Can you talk about how serious those side effects are? So brain bleeding, that sounds very serious. Brain swelling, that sounds really potentially serious. Can you help people understand how serious those potential side effects are on some of these drugs that doctors are currently prescribing for Alzheimer's?
Sure. So brain swelling, if the brain swells a little bit, you might get a headache. But if it swells too much, it's not compatible with life, because the centers of the brain that help with things like breathing and your heart rate your heart going, the autonomic system, they will actually get shut down if there's too much pressure on the brain. That's number one. And then bleeding, you can imagine if you lose too much blood into your brain, you can bleed to death and you can lose too much brain tissue. So
is that similar to a stroke?
correct. So if you have bleeding in the brain, it's called a hemorrhagic stroke.
And so these are side effects of drugs that doctors are recommending that are part of the standard of care for Alzheimer's 2025 in the United States.
Right. So both of those drugs were approved by the FDA. It was contentious, but it was approved by the FDA. And the concern is, I mean, not that every neurologist is offering that, but that is considered the standard of care. It's a top-down logic. It's, the FDA has approved, a government agency has approved these drugs for this indication. You have this indication, you should get this drug, or at least be offered.
Now our dear friend Dr. Heather Sanderson, who wrote the book Reversing Alzheimer's, New York Times bestselling book, she reversed Alzheimer's in her medical clinic with basically behavior. So it was diet, exercise, sleep, sauna. I think there might have been some red light in there. There was some supplements that she took, but no prescription drugs. What is the standard of care for most neurologists in the United States regarding Alzheimer's and lifestyle? Things that are not prescription drugs. Is there a standard of care there? Are there any sort of guidelines or recommendations?
I think realistically, most neurologists are not embracing lifestyle medicine. I mean, I'm board certified in it, but most neurologists are not. They're not recommending people change their diet. They're not recommending people improve their sleep. They're not recommending exercise. They're not recommending better social connection. They're not recommending decreasing stress. We know all 5 of those things will help prevent and reverse Alzheimer's, but they're not recommending it because, well, for many reasons, but unfortunately, this is one of those cases, I think you follow the money. There's not a lot of money in telling someone to get deep sleep. There's not a lot of money telling you, Robert, you should go exercise. There's not a lot of money in, Robert, you should start eating more vegetables. It's like there's just not a lot. The focus is, can I do a surgery and earn money? Can I give you a super expensive medication? That's what we're going to recommend.
And that's what we're seeing in our patients. They're going to their, this is what I often see. People write and say, "Hey, we're going to go see our neurologist. We waited 3 to 6 months to get this appointment with our neurologist. We've been my mother's been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. We're going to see the neurologist." Then the neurologist says, "Okay, you've got Alzheimer's. Here are all of these expensive tests that show that you have. By the way, I think a memory test will generally suffice, but they got all kinds of things, right? They might have a spinal tap. They got brain scans. They got hours of cognitive tests." And so you got Alzheimer's, and then they say, basically, there's nothing you can do. You might want to try to eat some blueberries. And then someone recently told me they handed them a list of community resources, which the doctor said, here's some resources for you. That was basically what the neurologist did. A bunch of tests that confirmed, yep, you got Alzheimer's disease. And they basically said, there's not a whole lot you can do. Thankfully, they didn't recommend Leqembi or these nasty drugs that can cause brain bleeding. So good for them. But they basically handed them a printout that said, here's some community resources and good luck. And then, if you want to come back in 6 months, we'll tell you how much worse off you are, right? Which is, they're just monitoring it. So they just do the test again and tell you how your brain is.
Yeah. So Robert, let me be clear. I'm not negative for everything that neurologists do. So for example, if you have someone who comes in, they have trouble with dementia, they're not thinking clearly, you definitely want to get a brain scan and make sure you don't have a tumor in your brain or a bleed there or something else like that. And guess what? Neurologists are expert at coming up with neurologic diagnoses. So neurologists have a role. Well, unfortunately, up until now, they have not embraced the concept that there's hope for Alzheimer's and other patients with neurological conditions, and they have not embraced lifestyle medicine as potential solutions to some of the problems.
So I think you hit the nail right on the head there. Hope. there is hope. So if you or someone you love has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease or some other form of dementia, there is hope. That is the current science. And then if your neurologist, whoever you're working with, doesn't understand that, please find someone who does understand that, because the current science is, I'll give you an example. If you just walk 9,800 steps a day, according to JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, published there, that reduces the risk of Alzheimer's disease by 50%. Just walking 9,800 steps, there's about 2 hours, or, if you're a day at Disney World, you're just doing that anyway. So walking can cut the risk of Alzheimer's disease in half. That's as much as the risk of one copy of the APOE4 gene. I actually have a copy of that gene, which is called the Alzheimer's gene. So that alone, walking alone, can basically negate the increased risk of one copy of the APOE4 gene.
Yeah, exactly right. And again, this is why you want a physician who's a problem solver, who's willing to say, I understand the standard of care. If I'm a neurologist, the standard of care says I will do these tests and I will do these things. But you know what? I've got a patient in front of me right now. I'm worried about them. It's a problem. And you know what? I'm going to come up with some solutions. I'm not going to just use what some large organization says. My primary responsibility is to the patient right in front of me. And it doesn't matter where that solution is. I need to solve that person's problem.
And what a lot of people don't understand, Dr. Stephen Gundry, famous heart surgeon, shared this with me. The published science today won't become the standard of care in medicine if it's correct, because not all science turns out to be true. Some of it's, not everything published is actually going to find out to be true 20 years later. But so published science today won't become the standard of care for 20 years. So if a doctor is using the standard of care to figure out how best to help their patient, they're by default 20 years behind the current science. And that's on a good day, right? On a good day, they're at least 20 years behind the current published science as far as what could be helpful to their patient.
That's a great point. That the attitude I see from many physicians, it's not unique to medicine, is that people get their training, they finish school, and then they go out in the real world and they practice, and they don't, for whatever reason, they do not want to continue to learn. They just want to be out in the world and see their patients and do what they were taught, whoever knows how long ago, when they finished their training. The problem is information in the medical area is exploding. If you're not actively trying to stay on top of it for your patients, you're not giving up-to-date care. And that's the bottom line.
And then that's one thing I love working about with you. You and I will text each other science, several times a week. Hey, did you see this article? Hey, what do you think about this? Hey, did you see this? Like we're constantly looking at what's new. One of my favorite things that's new, you were cutting edge on this before. You were years ahead on this, is creatine. New research published June 4 of 2025, so just this year, showed that 20 grams of creatine, this is by Kansas Medical School, 20 grams of creatine a day reversed memory loss in people with early stage Alzheimer's disease in this initial pilot study. That is awesome. And it's creatine super duper safe. It's not only good for muscles, but it's really good for the brain, is what we're finding out. And that was a great study that I wish every single doctor treating someone over age 60 would know about, because creatine is exceptionally safe. And Dr. Daniel Amen, famous psychiatrist, shared research that if you give creatine to patients who are doing psychotherapy, let's say for depression, you look at these two groups, creatine plus psychotherapy, just psychotherapy, this group does 50% better. Now, both groups improve because they're getting effective treatments, which is psychotherapy, but you give them creatine, which increases brain energy, and then they're able to do even better, because they might need to process things differently, or maybe they're just low on energy, generally speaking. So creatine plus psychotherapy even improves results of psychotherapy. And this is just wonderful, wonderful science that might not be the standard of care for 20 years.
Exactly right. But I mean, think about the equations here. If someone is making money by offering psychotherapy, and their clients are getting better, say, with 5 sessions instead of 15, that could hurt their bottom line. So there's these perverse incentives that exist in medicine. But you mentioned I was way ahead of the game. The reason I'm way ahead of the game is I have 2 degrees in biochemistry. I was taught to think. I've been thinking about this since I was a teenager. the bottom line is, if you have a chronic condition or any medical condition, you want to seek out a physician who has some experience. And one of the reasons you need to do that now is the education of students today is, I think, vastly inferior in general, not the Harvard MIT program that still exists, but for most physicians coming out of training today, they don't have the knowledge that the previous generations received.
You mentioned something really interesting from your recent visit to Harvard Medical School and the reunion was funding. Was a lot of the students don't understand the funding of medical schools. Can you talk about what the reality is of the funding of medical schools and why this is important to know?
Sure. Since the whole revolution of medical schools and the Flexner report over 100 years ago, it turns out that the funding for many medical schools has come from big pharma. And just to be clear, I have nothing against medications. I'm grateful that I have medications that I can offer my patients. But the problem is, what I see is that medical education today is biased towards what medication can I give my patient, or what procedure, what expensive operation can I do for my patient. And it's not about, what inexpensive lifestyle change can I use for my patient to prevent this disease from developing. So it's a hidden bias because, I was talking to first-year medical students over the weekend, and none of them understood that their the whole goal for teaching and for training is to train the next generation of researchers to develop medications and the physicians to prescribe medications.
That's how medical school is designed and funded, is to research medications and to get people to prescribe those medications. That's what you're saying.
Right. That's what I'm saying. And what I'm saying also is that this also goes back to the legal history of patents and how, because in general, you can't patent a natural substance. You have to take a natural substance and slightly change the biochemistry to make it unique, make it something that doesn't occur in nature. If you do that, you can get a patent on that medication and earn huge amount of profits from that medication. So that if you're doing testing to get approval on that medication, it may literally cost $1 billion to invest in that medication. If you don't have a hope and of earning profit from that medication, a big pharma company is not going to invest $1 billion in getting the drug approved. So one of the issues is many natural substances are not used or tested for efficacy to fix diseases, because if it's a natural substance, there's no money in it on the backside after these drugs get approved.
And so, but medical school is designed then to fuel this machine, to have researchers who will discover the next drugs, and have doctors prescribing those drugs, making a market for those drugs. That's kind of one of the designs of our current medical school system, and that's one of the reasons why Big Pharma is one of the biggest funders of medical schools across the country.
Right, and I remember when I graduated from Harvard Medical School in 1993, I got a gift bag from the makers of Tylenol. It's like, hey, congratulations, you're now a medical doctor. Here's some free samples of Tylenol.
So just in case you got a headache,
yeah.
Do not take if pregnant. That's the new data. So you mentioned being a lifetime learner. So the term, the practice of medicine, how long you've been practicing medicine, that has an intention behind it of kind of continuous learning. Something similar is lawyers. How long you've been practicing law. My dad is a tax and estate planning attorney. He's still practicing. I remember as a kid, he would come home late, probably one night a month, and he was at a seminar. And I didn't know what the heck that was. He said I was at a seminar. But what he was doing, he was learning the current law and how, because laws change. And so if you're going to do effective estate planning, you got to know how laws are changing and what things you can do to help your clients basically pay less taxes is what an estate planning attorney does. So he was constantly learning what's new. And if you're going to be good in medicine, you basically need to be learning what is the new science, and that's done correctly, right? A sample of 5 people, is not necessarily really great science you want to change your whole practice on, but you need to be current on the current science that's been validated and replicated so we can use that in your practice, right?
Exactly.
So we've been talking a lot about the standard of care. Let's help people with what they can do, because the standard of care is basically, hey, there's nothing you can do. Here's some community resources. Let's talk to them about what we're doing in our clinic that's being helpful with patients. So let's start with the free stuff. What are some of the free or low-cost things people can do to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's, or if they've been diagnosed, some things they can do to slow down or stop the progress so it doesn't get any worse?
Yeah, so in terms of free or inexpensive, I would start with lifestyle changes. Number one, eat plenty of plants, whole plants, and stay away from processed foods, things with added salt, oil, and sugar. Number two, get enough sleep. Make sure you're getting deep sleep. Make sure you're waking up refreshed. Number three is exercise. You can exercise for free, but it's cool. When you exercise, as you've mentioned, you release BDNF. Your brain gets rejuvenated. And then the next one is have a social community. It doesn't cost anything to have friends. And the final one is to reduce stress. And one way to reduce stress is just to take deep breaths. That doesn't cost anything. So a lot of the things that you can do are easy and they don't cost anything.
Yeah, so I want to go into each one of these. Let's start with community. A lot of people don't understand that one. I got to interview Dr. Robert Hidayah, who's a Sephardic Jew, and he said, I live in a community of other Sephardic Jewish people, and I got my cousin down the street, I got my aunt down the street. He said, we just have this lovely lifestyle where we have this lovely community, and we can basically go to any door in our neighborhood, and we know the people who lives there. We'll be invited in for tea or for food. We can socialize together. We can pray together. And I thought, goodness, that sounds really, really nice. And so can you talk about the benefits of community, of why that is so beneficial to the brain?
Yeah, so I think the reason is if you go back thousands of years, humans are a tribal community. We grew up with maybe 100 or 200 neighbors from our tribe, is very cohesive and supportive against other tribes, for example. So that was thousands of years ago. It seems like maybe it's different in the Sephardic community, but in the places I've lived, people barely know their neighbors anymore.
Yeah, it's true. I'm blessed that I know one of my neighbors. He's a professional jazz musician and trumpet player. I've got to see him play in the
Nice.
orchestra. But knowing your neighbors is a gosh darn big deal. And if you're a Christian, if you read the Bible, Jesus says love your neighbor. So maybe you want to start with knowing your neighbor and knowing their name. And boy, I remember during COVID, I would knock on my neighbors' homes and I would say, "Hi, I'm your neighbor. Are you doing okay? And do you need any toilet paper?" And I'd bring sardines. I would literally, I'd bring sardines from Costco and say, "Here, just take these, just in case you have trouble getting food. I want you to have some stuff." And I'd check in on the neighbors. And that felt really good to do. And I think that was good for them. So if you're a younger person and you have older community members, please check on your neighbors. Some dear friends of mine in Arizona, they have a farm and all their neighbors are like 60 plus. And they're the young guys that are called in to like change light bulbs and help them, get the raccoon out of the barn or whatever. So they're there being of help to their neighbors. So get to know your neighbors and be of help to your neighbors. It's a really wonderful thing. It makes living worthwhile. The point of living is not to buy a nicer phone so you can scroll on Instagram all day. It's really to have really wonderful relationships. Diet is something that people really screw up. Why is the standard American diet, the SAD diet, very well named, right? The SAD diet, the standard American diet. Why is that so damaging to the brain? Why is our diet in America increasing the risk of Alzheimer's disease?
Yeah, so the standard American diet is high in added salt, oil, and sugar, which do damage to blood vessels. It's also high in sugars and fats. It's a unhealthy combination. It looks normally very little resemblance to what our ancestors would have eaten thousands of years ago. We're just not adapted evolutionarily to this type of diet.
So we should be eating what our ancestors ate thousands of years ago.
True.
And so that's a lot of plants. Our ancestors ate a lot of wild plants, which would be vegetables, some fruits in the summer when they were ripe, right? You found fruit. That's why sugar tastes so good. And then every once in a while, they might kill an animal and they would eat that. And that was a source of fat.
Right. And there were times when food wasn't available. So guess what? It's okay on a given day if you don't eat or you eat much.
Yeah, fasting. Do you recommend fasting for the brain?
I do. I mean, I saw many neurologic conditions go away when people were water fasting for up to 40 days. But I recommend if you're going to fast, certainly more than a couple days, to do it under medical supervision because, yeah, the last thing I want someone to do is to get sick and start throwing up. And yeah,
I mean, 40 days is a serious fast. That's Jesus in the desert being tempted by the devil sort of fast. 30 days, like 40 days. That's a lot, Dr. Josh.
It is. But if they're medically supervised, we're checking labs on them. It's okay.
You mentioned there was someone who was obese. I think it was you who mentioned someone who was obese who did like a year's worth of fasting and basically lost that. Like, I don't know at what point they stopped being hungry, but their body figured out that they could just mobilize the fat in the body, and they were able to basically not eat for a year and lost, I don't know how many hundreds of pounds.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And it's interesting. Often with a water fast, after the first 2 days, your sense of hunger goes away because I think it's because your brain realizes like, hey, there are no calories coming in. I'm not going to torture you. Just because guess what? That happens. So if you're out on the savannah and there's no food, like why would you suffer? You're not going to suffer. It's just you take it easy until you find a food source again.
And then when you stop eating for a couple of days, your body learns to mobilize the fat and goes into a state of ketosis and burns your fat for energy. And that's actually really high quality energy, burning fat for fuel.
True. And guess what? If you're overweight, the reason our bodies put weight away is our ancestors had time periods where there wasn't adequate resources for food and they had to survive off of the fat in their own body. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with fat, but use it the way it was intended as fuel with the days you're not eating.
Now, a lot of things that medical doctors don't prescribe. One thing that they don't prescribe are supplements. Very few of them do. Very few of them recommend supplements. And there is a ton of data on supplements. We talked about creatine, one of the most studied supplements in history, extremely safe, very powerful, new research showing it's good for Alzheimer's disease. What are some of your favorite supplements that have shown in the science to be really, really beneficial for the brain, either improving memory or helping reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease?
Right. So we talked about creatine. I'm also a big fan of lion's mane, the mushroom. And then another good one is nitric oxide, which is just one nitrogen and one oxygen atom together, which opens up blood vessels. Many people with brain disorders, they do not have a good blood supply in their brain.
And then something that you and I designed, you were ahead of the curve on this one. I was a little reluctant to do this. You said, let's do an NMN supplement. So we designed an NMN supplement, and there are a couple of things that you added in particular to make it helpful. Can you talk about NMN? By the way, the FDA just approved NMN as a dietary supplement, which is really exciting. So this is now fully legal. It was kind of gray market or under the radar for the last 2 years, or it'd been disputed in the courts. Can you talk about the benefits of NMN, and then how you used your biochemistry mind to design the NMN that we have, and why that's so good?
Sure. So NMN stands for nicotinamide mononucleotide. It's a precursor to a very important energy molecule called NAD. And what this does is it reestablishes primitive energy pathways. So it's basically kind of a hack or a trick to short circuit and get your normal body's energy system working again. So that's number one. You're exactly right. We added specifically something called TMG or trimethylglycine, which is methyl groups are involved in the metabolism of NMN. So I wanted to make sure that patients weren't being harmed because we're taking away these methyl CH3 groups. And then finally, we put in there multivitamins to just make the supplement more effective.
That's right. And we have the shelf stable form of NMN beta. So if you're watching this, there are going to be a lot of NMN supplements flooding the market. Make sure you get an NMN beta supplement. Otherwise, it's not going to be shelf stable and it might degrade and you might not get the benefit. And it might have had NMN at the beginning, but by the time you purchase it and it arrives, it might have degraded and you're not going to get the benefit. So look for NMN beta. Any other supplements that you really like for the brain?
Oh, there's so many, but I'm a big fan of rosemary essential oil. There's something in the rosemary plant in the oil that helps with memory.
Fantastic. And so if you'd like to work with Dr. Josh and myself at our medical clinic, we have a medical clinic here in Florida where we are reversing Alzheimer's in our patients, and we do lifestyle medicine. And we work with an FDA clinical trial drug that was FDA approved for compassionate use for people with Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. The drug is extremely safe and getting great results. And so if you'd like to learn more about that, you can go to brainpowerclinics.com. And you can learn about that there. We have lots of free information for you there. And then if you'd like to work with Dr. Josh directly just to improve your health, you can visit drjosh.com. Great domain, by the way, drjosh.com, and you can learn about that there. And then Dr. Josh, can you tell them about the podcast that you have?
Sure. Yeah. The podcast is at drjosh.com/podcast. It's called Alzheimer's Breakthrough with Dr. Josh Helman. And the focus there is interviews with experts on strategies to prevent and reverse Alzheimer's and other neurologic problems. And
so you're constantly learning from your guests, and we're using that information in our clinic and with our patients. So you can't help but be learning constantly about how to prevent and reverse Alzheimer's.
Yeah, no, I'm a sponge, and that's what I love going to this 55th reunion of this Harvard MIT Medical School program. Specifically, everyone there is enthusiastic about learning and assimilate new information and sharing it with other people and with patients. So it is a forward-looking community. It exists out there. My concerns I shared with you is that's not typical. So what I would urge you is don't be afraid to seek out a doctor like myself with years of experience and gray hairs.
And you and I are going to an anti-aging, cutting-edge anti-aging longevity conference this weekend here in Southern Florida, Eudaimonia, where some of the top anti-aging longevity experts are going to be there as well, including Dr. Andrew Huberman, who I really like, neuroscientist from Stanford, and Dr. Mark Hyman, who is head of the Cleveland Clinic. He was part of their functional health. So really some great information we're going to learn there as well. And Dr. Austin Perlmutter too, great neurologist. And so we continue our learning so that we can be as helpful as we can in helping our patients. Dr. Josh, thank you so much for making the time to be here. I know you just got back from your Harvard reunion, and when you shared with me the crazy things the students are learning and not learning, I just wanted to capture this while this is still fresh. So thank you so much for making the time to be here.
Well, thanks for asking the tough questions, and it's been a pleasure. And peace and plants.
Peace and plants.